Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the T.H.O. Movie Reviews podcast, the show where we bring you passionate, honest, and insightful film criticism. I'm your host, Bennett Campbell Ferguson. I'm upstairs at Market of Choice in Portland, Oregon today with some of my wonderful colleagues, starting with Patrick Belin. Patrick, how are you?
Hey ho, I'm okay.
Are you still, it sounds like you might still be mourning a little over the Dark Tower.
Yeah, a little bit, but we'll get into that at another podcast.
Yeah.
Or I might bring it up today for today's topic. Who knows?
It may fit in with the topic, yeah.
Plot twist.
And also here we have Mo Shaunette. Mo, how are you today?
I got mac and cheese. I'm doing all right.
Mo has mac and cheese. That mac and cheese generally makes things all right, I find.
It's the truest comfort food.
And we need comfort food because we're going to be talking about some of the worst Hollywood has to offer.
These are dark times.
These are dark times, yeah. On screen and off, I might add. And also here we have Maxwell Meyers.
Hello, I'm Maxwell Meyers. I'm not an alcoholic. I can stop whenever I'd like.
You're not an alcoholic, but are you a LaCroix-aholic?
No comment. No comment.
Are you a LaCroix boy?
Don't you know that video was a little too real.
Was that a video? Because I just heard that people say that.
Oh, it's a video. There's a video that goes with it, and this guy had all these LaCroix cans. Oh my god, it is insane.
This podcast brought to you by the wonderful people at LaCroix.
And Market of Choice. They don't know we're here.
I don't think they care. I don't care.
Well, we're gathered here today at Market of Choice to talk about an idea Patrick came up with. We're going to talk about the worst tropes in movies today, and obviously this is not a topic we can cover in one podcast, or frankly even in 100 podcasts, because there's a lot of bad tropes out there. But we're going to do our best. We're going to go around maybe a couple times and each talk about a trope we don't like, and then everybody else will talk about do they agree that this trope is a problem? Do they agree that this is something that's not good for films and the film industry? So, Patrick, do you want to start off and tell us the first trope that you think is a problem in movies today?
Sure. This is the idea that kickstarted this whole thing for me, was how a lot of screenplays are kind of forcing this idea of a conundrum or puzzle in a film, so that people will talk about it on social media afterwards. I'm sensing that this is more of a marketing ploy than anything. I appreciate movies that have puzzles built into them, kind of like the Sixth Sense, where it works, where it really works. But I'm afraid movies these days are kind of moving in this direction just for a little bit of a shtick, where it's not really needed, and if anything, it kind of detracts from the overall experience. The example that I think about in this is It Comes at Night, but I'm sure there are more examples out there, and I'll think about them as we go along.
I find this to be a really interesting thing, because it reminds me of something that A.O. Scott wrote years ago about Inception, where he felt like that movie was kind of leading viewers to kind of have these questions, so they'd sort of have to buy a ticket for a second viewing. And I disagree with that particular example. I disagree
with it as well.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah, I mean, I know, and I think for both of us, Inception's one of our favorite films of all time. But do you think that movies that did that well, movies like Inception, or Memento, do you think like what you're describing with a film like It Comes at Night, what that's doing is kind of like a bastardized version of these, successful puzzle films?
Yes, absolutely. I think going back to Inception, we can see how popular it was and how it really did get people talking. But I would reject the notion that Inception is included in this criticism of mine, saying that Chris Nolan and his brother developed the script over 10 or 12 years.
Yeah,
so they didn't sit around thinking about how to make a shtick for its own sake. I think they really tried to write a really good script, and I think it paid off. But you're right in that films like this is kind of triggering this copycat syndrome with a lot of other productions, and they're trying to get into a similar space, but doing it cheaply, where perhaps it wasn't necessary in the first place, but they add it on anyways at the end.
Right.
And I don't appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like I think this speaks to an even larger problem. The example I always bring up. After the first Star Wars film, not the Phantom Menace, kids, Episode 4. There was Hollywood kind of wheeled out anything that was starry or spacey or whatever. A lot of movies like that, and the problem was they didn't realize that why that original Star Wars struck people was because it was fresh. Because it felt really vibrant and new and shiny and chrome, dare I say it, at the time. And so there's this bad mindset, I think, of if you have a success, copy it, Xerox it, and not like oh, this was successful because it was fresh and struck people in a new way, and let's find the next thing that is fresh and strikes people in a new way.
I like how you say shiny and chrome, because I just want to say cuff cuff Battlestar Galactica cuff cuff. I'm talking about the original in the 70s.
Right. Well said. Well, Maxima, what do you guys think? Do you guys have you given thought to the puzzle problem that Patrick's talking about in the movies?
It's not something I've noticed particularly. Maybe it's just maybe I've just not been paying attention as much. I get what you're saying, though. I wouldn't say pretension, but it's a form of attempting to seem profound and deep and insightful when there's not enough to back it up, which is basically what pretension is. I can't really think of movies that are like that.
I actually thought of one that
Go for it.
You and I saw together. And this is...
is that Henry?
No, it's...
No,
this isn't the worst example of this, but I was just thinking about the ending of Logan Lucky. And while I really liked the film, I felt that the twist with what really happened with the heist, and then the final twist that happens at the very end, both of those I felt were, kind of pointless and just sort of used to...
For me, that kind of makes the movie.
Okay, good. Say more about that.
Okay, let's go on a tangent. It's Logan Lucky. I'm going to do my best not to spoil it, but the way that the heist goes, it's very well shot and put together, but it kind of... there's not a lot of unexpected parts to it. There's a few hiccups, but it doesn't really go completely off the rails. And the third act, when it's like the aftermath of the heist, that's for me what makes the movie, because that's where you see oh, these guys were way smarter than we expected.
Okay.
And I liked it. I thought it worked. And I just like that movie.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I like it too, yeah. Max, what about you? Any thoughts on the puzzle conundrum?
I don't know. I tend to... It seems where I notice this trope you're talking about seems to fall mostly in the horror category. And that's, or at least in the movies that I see. And I don't know why. I think there was a time where it was you had something like Friday the 13th. It's there really was no twist. It wasn't a whodunit. It wasn't a mystery. It was just... There's a guy just killing people. It's more like the suspense of watching it happen.
Kind of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of thing.
Yes, there's a lot. I mean,
no twist. He's a guy with a chainsaw. Surprise.
Jaws, there's no twist. It is the shark. He knows it's the shark. He's been saying it's the shark since the beginning of the movie. The only person who's not
Spoiler
saying it's the shark...
The shark is Khan.
The only person saying it's not a shark is the mayor. But we all still know it's a shark, so there's no real twist here.
It turns out the shark was dead the whole time.
Oh, God. What, that's missed.
Mind blown.
Ghost shark.
Now we're getting into Pirates of the Caribbean territory.
Oh, I thought it was a prequel to Ghost Dad. So I find, but that's the other thing that's really the thing that divides certain horror movies is is it a slasher suspense or is it a horror mystery? And I don't know where, I think it was kind of continued, you could say the Scream movies kind of really drove that plot device into horror movies permanently in the 90s, is a mystery element and a whodunit. I personally kind of like it. I very rarely am I'm also not one of those people that goes, oh my gosh, I just saw blah blah blah. What a twist! Because I'm also a considerate person who goes, wow, that ending was a little different and crazy. And unless it's bad, I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to spoil it for anyone else.
Sure.
So if anything, if that's their goal is to get me to talk about their movie, it's not working. So I just might be the rarity though. I think a little mystery is fine.
Yeah.
But I think it depends on the genre. I feel like I very rarely get that twist ending in a lot of my other movies. I'm also fairly keen. They very rarely catch me off guard. I watched Children of Men and I was like, I think I know where this is going. And I was right.
Well, yeah, I mean, it starts out depressing and it gets, even more depressing.
I mean, that volcano, who saw that coming?
I think what I would ask is, please don't force the issue. I mean, if this is going to happen, let it happen because it should happen in the script originally as an original part of the inspiration, as opposed to being this add-on, this tacked on optional thing that, let's throw this in just to kind of make it groovy.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the lesson, like this with all things is, it's all about how you execute it. I mean, you look at the original Star Wars trilogy to, go back to Star Wars, because I always seem to go back there because I'm a nerd. The Darth Vader twist now seems, almost preordained, because they even set that up in the first one. If you really listen to what old Uncle Owen is talking about, that's what I'm afraid of, But whereas for every movie like that, there's a book.
What he said was true from a certain point of view.
From a certain point of view, yes. And then for every movie like that, there's a Book of Henry that is just gives you whiplash.
Was there even a twist in that movie?
I think
the twist was that they got you to pay for it.
I mean
not for me. I work at that theater.
I didn't have to pay for it either since I reviewed it. But yeah, I don't know. I mean,
they paid you to see it.
They paid me to see it, yeah.
Oh,
but then they, the twist that he dies, the twist that it seems like a drama and then it's like a vigilante movie, or as you said, what did you say? A Wes Anderson directed version of Death Note?
Yes.
Another thing is that I think this is kind of a timely topic also, because I'm really hoping that Last Jedi doesn't fall victim to this, because I've heard some talk about how Last Jedi is going to have a few twists and turns in it, and I hope it works, because if it doesn't, then that's going to seriously piss me off.
They better not turn Luke evil. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
that's what I'm suspecting. I'm suspecting the tables are going to turn between Kylo Ren and Luke Skywalker, but I don't know.
This actually brings up another thing I want to talk about, but your other trope you don't like ties into it, so I'll save it for later.
I'll save it for the next one.
Yeah, but moving on, Max, why don't you tell us about the first trope that has incurred your wrath, the wrath of Myers?
It's more just like Facebook bitching, but we'll get there. We all have our powers. Mine is the stupid smart characters. I think it leads really well into my points about horror films. We used to have this wonderful trope that everybody used to complain about, it seemed, in the 90s, which was that dumb cheerleader character that would always wander into the basement because she heard a sound, and she's like convinced that it might be her boyfriend Biff. Might being the key word, because she keeps saying his name.
I love that you said her boyfriend Biff. The name just seems so appropriate.
She keeps saying,
that's such a 50s name.
She's like, Biff, is that you in the basement? The light switch isn't working. Biff, stop it. I know you're trying to play a trick on me. Like, what's the trick? I'm going to stand in the basement and not say anything? It's like, I'm going to scare you. So she's like, so instead of giving into Biff's stupid joke or fighting it, which would be the real revenge, if she was really mad at Biff, she would not go down there, whether or not he was there. But she wanders into the basement anyways, and you're sitting there going, why are you going down there? The killer's down there. You heard a sound. Just leave the house. But then you go, well, she's clearly established herself as a bimbo. Nowadays, let's flash forward to now, we have like the well-educated woman or man who is studying the spooky house syndrome and is playing with the Ouija boards, going, don't do that, don't incur the wrath of the ghost, it's probably just a thing, and it turns out it's something way worse than I thought it was. And they still keep investigating instead of going, fuck this, I'm out. And like, they're going, I know it's an evil ghost, but I must lay it to rest, or I must know what happened to the murdered children in the furnace. Like, and then they just wander into the furnace, but you're still going, why are you wandering in there? So my point is that I'm like, at least if we're gonna have them wander into the shady basement looking for Biff, let's make them an idiot in the first place. Let's not dress them up as the scientist who's been studying the genomes of the Jurassic raptor chicken. I don't know.
It's a little bit disingenuous
exactly.
to kind of try and have it both ways.
Or even a bunch of scientists in a room who always seem to miss a minor detail that makes you go, how the hell could you miss that? There's like 10 of you. Don't you guys like follow after one another? Be like, when is the show? Be like, hey, wait a second, this doesn't look right. Did you like the second guy's like, I'm sure it's fine, and then just followed all the way down? Oh no. So I think that's a real problem. Is smart characters doing dumb things because now it actually makes less sense than before, and makes me rage inside.
Well, what you're talking about makes me rage inside too.
Yes,
and to get the first of all, but it also reminds me of a piece that this guy Tom Roskin wrote for Premiere back when Premiere was a thing. R.I.P. And he said that horror films often portray characters as aggressively stupid to invite the audience's contempt, essentially, so you can enjoy, seeing people disemboweled or what have you. And he was pointing out that, and I think what you're talking about speaks to this. There's something a little bit disturbing about that, like where it's like you're kind of being either invited to or tricked into like taking pleasure in, watching these people like have the, go through these horrible experiences and.
Just to see Debbie get murdered looking for Biff.
Yeah, and like I don't really want to have that experience. I want to be like with the character, not looking down on them. One of the reasons I like The Wolf of Wall Street is because, it's about a despicable human being, but you're with him, A lot of the time he looks like he's having a lot of fun, and you get like, well, yeah, if I, had that much money, would I behave any better, I don't know,
Well, and that's the weird part about the change is that before it was like, generally the dumb characters were also kind of despicable. They play right into that trope of you're kind of happy that they're gone. Like, you made this stupid choice, like, finally. But now it's like the movies, what they do is they actually build up this relationship with this person. You're like, oh, wow, they're smart. Oh, man, look, they're making the right choices. They actually brought flashlights and enough gas, and there is some self-reception. Like, they think ahead, and then something doesn't go right, and then they still wander into the trap. It's almost more frustrating, and maybe that's the goal, is to give me even
because
more
they're trying to solve.
Well, because before you're like, oh wow, this person is smart. Like, they establish it so well. They get you on their side, which is like worse, because then it's like, wait, I liked you. Why are you making terrible choices? Now I'm disappointed. And before it's like,
I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed.
And I know, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
Well, Patrick and Mo, is this something that's bothered you as well in movies?
Kinda. I don't watch a lot of horror movies, so I'm really this kind of is not something that I go in for.
It doesn't really happen in a lot of comedies.
It doesn't really. No, there are stupid characters who make stupid decisions, but that's the point. It's a comedy. You kind of take it at face value, a suspension of disbelief.
Well,
except in The Hangover, where everyone is very clear-headed and logical from the opening credits to the very end. But that's the exception to the rule.
And the worst case that happens in the comedy, somebody doesn't get the thing that they were crazily scheming for. It's like, nothing ends in death.
Yeah, most of the time. There's the Comedy of Errors, where the opening, the narrator explains, we got this guy and his lost twin brother, and they both, by coincidence, have the same name. They also have servants who are also twin brothers who also have the same name between them. It's a comedy. You just gotta roll with it.
Which reminds me, this is a tangent, but I once saw Comedy of Errors performed by only two people, and that was a mindfuck.
That seems like it would be.
That sounds excellent.
So yeah, I do appreciate it when characters are like they act logically throughout. Like that's what's. I'm going to talk a lot about Get Out for the next forever because I love that movie. But that's part of what works about it is that he makes the smart decisions, and you see like the logic in play, and you see that like obviously we, the viewers, know this is a horror movie situation because we can see the cinematography and we hear the score and we see the trailer, so we know what's up. He doesn't. So it's either him being paranoid or there's some weird going on. And either of those are viable options.
And it seems like whenever anyone talks about Get Out, they talk about Daniel Kaluuya. Like they're not talking about the horror. They're talking about really the journey that character goes through.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
And see, that I don't think really applies in this situation. That made sense. Well, I went and saw that with you, and I was like, he's basically reacting the way I think he should. Like, he basically got to the point, he goes, I am leaving, with or without you. Are you coming? And she's like, fine, I'll come. So you're like, okay, at least he was like, well, that's what we all would say. Like, I'm leaving, goodbye.
This is an uncomfortable situation that may be bordering on an actual crime. So...
Yes.
Let's GTFO.
Patrick, oh, sorry, we're gonna...
Oh, no, with regard to what Max was saying, I completely agree that it's a problem, but what I want to ask is, why is it a recurring problem? And the more I think about it, I think it's just down to either lazy writing, no talent in the writing, or a combination of both. But then there's also this issue of how sometimes in the middle of production, scripts will go into rewrite. Like they have to cut the time down for whatever reason, and they need to patch up some loose ends. So they just throw in this super smart character that just knows everything and just makes the story progress. So that's probably why we're seeing it and why we're going to continue to see it, and that's really unfortunate.
Well, I'm hoping we'll rubber band more towards the Get Out scenario, which is they make the logical choices within the situation, yet maybe things just don't go right. I think I'd be fine with that. There was one that I did like. It was the Don't Be Afraid of the Dark was directed by Guillermo del Toro? No.
Oh, he was a producer on it.
Producer, and it was about tooth fairies. But they're terrifying. And they're mostly terrifying the child, and the parents don't believe her because she's a child. And it's actually the stepmom played by Katie Holmes who finally starts to indulge her a little bit and comes around and ultimately becomes her ally. But see, this is the thing. In those moments, I'm like, sure, they're frustrating that you're like, why won't people listen to children? But people don't listen to children. That's a normal thing that just happens. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And when the wounds start showing up on the child, though, the stepmom's like, wait a second. Maybe there is something here. So again, the progression works. I think that's how you have to do it. The problem is when you bring in something like tooth fairies or ghosts, what's the logical decision that doesn't just end with, all right, I'm out?
See, then we got something like, speaking of that, reminded me of the new Netflix adaptation of A Series of Unfortunate Events, which is the same thing because the entire story revolves around the adults in the situation being terrible.
They're awful people.
That seems like you have it's a little bit easier to do because it's satirical, or at least the book
to
story.
some extent, yes, but it's also like, no, these kids are actually in mortal danger, and the adults are doing nothing to stop it. Like, we reached, like, the third story in the series, and by now, the bad guy has presented himself as a threat. He's attempted to kidnap and/or kill the children, and like the guy who is their accountant, who's also acting as their lawyer and as child protective services for no reason.
How big is this town?
I don't know. When does this take place?
Good point.
But he's basically like, okay, I'm going to shepherd you to your next legal guardian since the last one died. Instead of, moving them to protective custody, like what a normal person would do. And then it's like, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and drop you off in this town. You can hail a cab and go up. I got to get back to work. It's like,
like, how many times can you do that?
I get that the point of this story is that you need, like, children are smarter than we think, and we should listen to them more often, and that these kids are really resourceful, and the story needs to move forward because they're kids, they need to be, like, the central focus. But come on! At what point does logic step in?
I think you've just, hit upon, the very thing of the matter, which is that it's so much easier to write a screenplay when you don't have to deal with that goddamn pesky logic. I mean, it's just, you know, and I mean, you mentioned laziness, Patrick, you know, I mean, that I think as long as laziness persists, and, you know, of course it will, you know, with this and any genre, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of this. Unfortunately, I don't think it's a trope that's gonna go away.
It's a production issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think it could easily be. I think we've definitely a writing issue, but I think there was some well-intentioned writers who were like, I want to write smart characters, but then again ran into that issue. If they were really smart, they would have left the house like 2 days into the 5-day adventure and been like, all right, I'm a man of science, but there's a point. Can we analyze this away from the scene?
We like to talk about like how important good writing is, but if you fail at that, you're failing much more visibly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, go ahead. No. One last thing about this being a production issue. One example that comes to mind for me is Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven. When I saw
this made me want to ask you about Ridley Scott, actually.
When I saw the original theatrical cut of Kingdom of Heaven, I thought it seemed a bit disjointed, like something was missing. Mm-hmm. It was an enjoyable film, but I felt like something was missing. And then when I saw the director's cut, the extended with all the scenes that were cut out, the whole thing felt more complete. And so it just kind of strengthens my point about how during the production process, sometimes they like to cut things out for whatever reason, like theaters like go up in arms saying like, oh, you can't play this movie because it's too long, you know, you got to make it a certain runtime, blah, blah, blah. And another example are all three of the original Lord of the Rings movies. The extended cuts were so much more than what we saw in the theaters. But they did a really good job of editing it down. Yeah. The editing job was really, really well done considering how much they cut out. But I guess they have to do a better job in the editing room, you know,
absolutely,
to make it work.
I couldn't agree more, and I hope if nothing else, you know, we'll see more filmmakers like Scott who at least if they don't get their vision, allow us to see it in the long run. Yeah. But what about you, Mo? What's the first trope you'd like to talk about that's incurred your wrath to keep bringing that zesty force back into the conversation?
The one for me, it's not necessarily incurred my wrath, it just bothers me. We do see more movies that are about confronting racism, that are about confronting sexism, or about confronting homophobia and stuff like that. And I'm glad for that. But one of the common denominators is that these movies are historicals. They're set in the past. And a big part of that, for me at least, is it feels like filmmakers are basically softballing it. They're saying, look how bad things were back then. We're better than that now. Which is, we are probably marginally better than that, but it's not entirely fixed.
No.
So for as much as I appreciate movies like Hidden Figures, like we've got Detroit that just came out, Gook came out today. Stories where they're meant to be like reflections of our present in our past, and it's like, can we talk about the present? Can we talk about this stuff that is still going on, that hasn't gone away since 1960 whatever, or 1992?
Civil rights movement?
Yeah.
We're like in the second wave civil rights movement or something. It seems
that's one term for it.
I think, I mean, that's such a great point. And I think one thing that one of many things that illustrates what a big problem this is you look at the difference between, you know, the reception to 12 Years a Slave, you know, and the reception to Selma. You know, both, you know, films about, you know, brutality and injustice and racism and bigotry. And, you know, I mean, they're both set in the past, but then the reaction to Selma was so much more muted. You know, and it was people were so much more eager to sweep it under the rug, you know, and, you know, like not giving Ava DuVernay a Best Director nomination, and it almost seems like even that was too close to the present for some people, you know, which is, I mean, and that's, you know, the 60s, you know, so there's a real, I do see exactly what you're saying, a fear to engage with what's happening now, you know.
Yeah. Or like in Hidden Figures, like they made like fictitious white characters to represent the various aspects. So we've got who was the boss? Who played the boss?
Was Kevin Costner?
Kevin Costner.
Okay.
I wanted to say Kevin Kline, but that wasn't right.
No.
Kevin Costner as the boss who is ostensibly good, but doesn't realize the extent of how much segregation is like
Bad.
pervades their lives.
Kirsten Dunst.
Kirsten Dunst as the one who's like, and who's the other guy, the Big Bang Theory guy.
Oh, Sheldon. What's his name?
Jim
Jim Parsons.
Right.
As
that guy.
sort of avatars of that day racism, where it's just like, oh, they're bad, but then they learn not to be bad, and it's
Or
like,
yeah.
Lesson learned.
I feel
Is this
better
like-
about me.
yeah. So you want to see yourself as Kevin Costner, and not as these two people. They gave them fake white people to be good. This is something Lindsay Ellis talked about. This she did a video on Pocahontas, on Disney's Pocahontas, and the other Disney movies that were about indigenous peoples, namely what was it? The Emperor's New Groove, Brother Bear, and Moana. And sort of the key difference is that with Pocahontas, they tried to frame this group of indigenous people through the lens of white people. And it's about how they relate to white people. And for the other films, they don't do that. And it kind of works better there. So this is like really delicate topics. I'll say it, but it's something that I would like to see engaged in a more direct way. It's like there's a documentary coming up about the Ferguson, Missouri protests.
Right. Whose streets?
Yeah, and I'd like to see more like that. And we've got, like, again, I'm gonna plug this movie till the day I die. 13th on Netflix, favorite film of last year. These are more. I'd like to see more stories like these, not about like how the past relates to the present, but relating to the present directly through these stories.
Sure.
You know, what movie that I saw recently that kind of does what you would like to see more of, that addresses these social issues directly in the present, is Dinner with Beatrice, or
Beatrice at Dinner. Yes.
Beatrice at Dinner. I thought that was great. I won't get into that too much, but it's a sort of film that does not kind of abstract it into the past. That it talks about it in the present moment and how people are now, you know, and it illuminates that. And I thought that was great. And yeah, I agree with you that I'd like to see more of that. Actually.
And we see stuff like this on TV, and it works because you got shows like even some like a softball sitcom like Blackish.
Sure.
Like they have an episode about Black Lives Matter. We've got stuff like Atlanta. We've got stuff like Dear White People on Netflix. You know, it's about living as a person of color in the 21st century and like all the difficulties and all the obstacles that are there.
See, I was actually thinking of The People vs. O.J. Simpson when you brought this up. I think that's actually a pretty good example of, I think, what Selma was trying to do. I felt like when I watched that, I felt like that actually related more to what's going on today than Selma did. I think Selma got really close to it, but I remember watching that for 10 hours straight, sick in bed, and just getting so angry. Because I was like, nothing has changed. I'm like, again, yeah, it's got a little better, but like it did not leave me with that feeling where like, oh, these things are better now. Like I definitely was like, they're not better. I was like, this is poorly handled on both sides. I get like you kind of get where both sides come from, but you're still frustrated. And I think I would recommend now, and I think it is weird that maybe it's because again we have the wonderful 10 hours to tell a story situation as opposed to our 2, maybe 2.5 hours, depending on how a theater feels about that, to try and make that happen. But I know studios, they're afraid to touch these topics because they're happening now, and it's like
they're afraid of a lot of things.
They're afraid of what they're afraid of is A, will it upset people? Because if they're upset, they're not going to want to see it, and then B, what if they say it and then it's wrong? Only time will tell. Don't worry, we'll talk about the story 20 years from now. Maybe. So,
Just as a tangent, I want to say that on that point, I think we're kind of entering a more uber nihilist period of Hollywood where they want people to get upset because it'll get them talking about the movie, and it'll get them to want to see it.
Hey, if your movie can't have a puzzle, let's have a talking point.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like any press is good press. I suppose is the maximum for that.
Sure,
That's true.
Because I don't know, I'm trying to think of like a movie, a recent movie that like benefited from some outrage. I mean, I know there must have been something, right? But,
Critical outrage.
I mean,
or just like the kind of thing you're talking
or maybe
about,
like Suicide Squad. All
There
last,
have been
I
a
mean,
few,
not
actually,
necessarily
but-
negative press, but weird press. Weird press that you're leading up and you're hearing about all the reshoots. I mean, you could talk about any movie that when someone goes,
I know
"We're doing
we've had some
reshoots."
fairly recently. I just can't remember any good examples right now.
Sure. Well, I know. I mean, this is obviously a different kind of thing, but remember Batman versus Superman? The reviews were so bad, and there was the hello darkness, my old friend. like I think it kind of
Sad
like
Ben Affleck.
yeah, it kind of created a thing where people were like, wow, it's so awful. I'm kind of curious.
What we were just talking about.
But that's like
Is an
something
example
like
of
The
that.
Room or Birdemic, those kind of cult classics that are just
Sure.
So
absolutely
bad.
terrible.
So bad.
I think we're getting that with Justice League now. Like this is what we've talked about, but like everything that's gone on behind the scenes, it's like, what's gonna happen? We've gone through two different directors with like both of them
$25 million worth of reshoots.
25 million in reshoots. They're reacting to the negative reception to Batman v Superman while they're shooting it.
Don't forget about Mustache Gate.
There's Mustache Gate. Both of the directors have gone through like personal troubles that have become publicized. What is gonna happen? Ben Affleck is talking about leaving the franchise. We don't know what his spin-off Batman movie is going to be, or if it's even in the continuity. We got 2 Joker movies in the works now for God knows why. What the hell is going on in
It's
Warner
so
Brothers?
weird. They do Wonder Woman, and you're like, okay, maybe they can get this right. Nope, they can't. Who let them have the keys? Take them away.
Well, I for one am excited to see how this Justice League presumed train wreck works out. But one more thing I want to say about what you brought up, Mo.
Yes.
I remember I read a phrase once. I can't remember where I read it, but it said Hollywood has always loved to pat itself on the back for self-righteousness.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I don't know. It just seems like we're. This probably goes back much even farther than this, but it just seems like we're getting into kind of the guess who's coming to dinner problem. Where it just that movie felt very much like it was there to make Spencer Tracy look good for overcoming his racism, and it's just I don't know. It's a depressing state of affairs.
Well, the self-congratulatory issue, I think the Oscars are a good example of that.
Yeah.
It's political on that front.
What?
Makes me wonder what they're gonna do like this year. Like we don't know what's gonna get nominated because we haven't hit that season yet. But the trend I noticed was that Oscars tend to go like serious movie, fun movie, serious movie, fun movie, winning Best Picture every year. So this year we had serious movie with Moonlight. So what's gonna happen next? Are we gonna just find some fluff piece and give it a Best Picture Oscar or what?
It's it's so much about momentum, because I think I know Steven Spielberg's The Papers is a serious movie, but it's so just almost unbearably timely. I mean, dealing with the Pentagon Papers, at this moment when freedom of the press is under fire with shall we say greater intensity than usual. So I mean, I could still see the papers bringing out.
I actually worry that we're going to have a weird swing. We have movies like Get Out happening, and then Moonlight wins Best Picture. Beyonce was snubbed with her album Lemonade. She did not win the Grammy, but we talk about then we got like strong Latino characters in these movies, and we're talking about how we're doing so well with all this diversity, and then we end up nominating all the white people because we actually pat ourselves on the back for talking about it for so long. We're like, good. But I really liked Kate Blanchett. I was like, so I actually worry that we'll swing the opposite direction. But my heart hopes that what we'll do is keep talking about it and go, yeah, you're right. There's a lot of diversity. We should reward that. Like they were like, we got Dev Patel nominated.
Not as in terms of like, we got a lot of diversity, good for us. It's, we got a lot of diversity, let's keep going.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Let's not get complacent, let's not stop.
Yes.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Hollywood always does that, though. They always,
Yeah.
I mean, I believe there was the year that 12 Years a Slave won. The very next year, all white actors nominated.
So White.
The Oscars So White first
Yeah.
happened. Because they're like, we did so good. We did not let Gravity win and did not let sci-fi get their win. We gave it to the slave movie. Good job, us. And then all white actors again. So I do feel that's a trend. I'm hoping it changes. I would love to see it change this year with Moonstruck winning Best Picture, and then Moonlight. Moonlight, not Moonstruck the Chocolate Factory.
Well, what makes me sad though is that your characterization of that mindset could be actually scarily accurate, because I would imagine there are a lot of millionaires and billionaires who live in that lifestyle who are just completely devoid of reality, who live in their privilege bubbles. So they really do have this thought like, I just congratulate myself that I give it to 12 Years a Slave.
Man,
and that's just really sad to me.
It's the line from Get Out. It's like these people have never seen a black person that didn't work for them.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, all due respect to Brad Pitt, who has really lent his way to a lot of great movies as a producer. But I mean, he was like a producer on 12 Years a Slave and Moonlight. I wouldn't call Brad Pitt necessarily an in-touch guy. I don't know.
I can't speak to his personal life.
I don't know, but what
despite the constant coverage.
I haven't been over for dinner in a while. Definitely not since the divorce.
Are you more Team Angelina?
I'm not. I haven't been invited over by either. I think they just both decided to cut their losses and cut me out. It's cool. I'm working on a plan to become friends with Jennifer Lawrence.
So mom and dad got divorced, and neither of them wanted visitation rights.
No, it's cool. We had fun. We did that thing once. I don't want to talk about it.
They just want you to know that it's your fault.
I had a feeling. I mean, I have that effect on everyone.
But yeah, so and another example, we're finally getting superhero movies with female leads. We got Wonder Woman came out, and then we're gonna get Captain Marvel. They're both set in the past, because Wonder Woman's set in World War I.
Yeah.
Captain Marvel's gonna be in the 90s. It feels like it's continuing. Now we also have Black Panther, which is gonna be in the present. And it's going to be like this Afrofuturism kind of thing.
Right.
I am so down for that.
That looks cool.
That looked
really
like
cool.
How did Janelle Monáe not get in that movie?
Everything about like their depiction of Wakanda is just like this amalgamation of different African styles from different countries, and it looks so awesome, and I'm so into it. So I hope for the future. Hope for the best, expect the worst. But I would like to see movies that are more contemporary, that don't just feel like they're chasing a zeitgeist, but they're like authentic stories about living in the 21st century as women, as people of color, as gay people, LGBT people.
Yeah.
I'd like to see more of that.
I think that's.
Let me ask you a question, Mo.
Go for it.
This criticism that you have, would you say that it's Hollywood just trying to dance around potential controversy as opposed to addressing it straight on, which is why they kind of want to abstract the issue into the past?
Possibly. I think it's partly that. I think that's also like if you said something in history, it looks like it has more gravitas. Like you do a movie.
The Imitation Game or something like that.
The Imitation Game, the Detroit riots in Detroit, or stuff like that. It could also be like just an issue like there are times when I don't know the Hollywood system forward and back, but it seems like there are times when you have scripts in development forever, and so producers are just grabbing up stuff that seems relevant to now, and a lot of them are historicals. So I can't speak for that. it does feel like they're trying to be clever and without tackling this head on.
Yeah, right.
And I want to see some more, not necessarily courage, but at the very least, like, directness.
No, I
from a lot of
completely
these
agree.
movies.
Going back to the Wonder Woman example again, I feel like it's definitely there's a lot of feminism embedded into it, and putting Wonder Woman in the past kind of feels to me like pulling their punches a little bit, like not really going direct or bold with the whole
and then,
feminist
they've
narrative.
announced the sequel takes place during the Cold War, so we're gonna.
I don't know if that's confirmed though. I mean, it's whispered. I wouldn't be surprised if it were true.
I wouldn't either, because again, like, Wonder Woman's theme is combating the big wars now.
Yeah.
And really, I don't think they're going to do World War II because, well,
Wonder Woman, the first Justice Leaguer.
Yeah, partially, but also because Wonder Woman's idea is, like, seeing the inherent goodness in man despite their atrocities, and that's tough to do when one side is, Nazis.
Yeah.
What makes it even more disappointing is that the first time we saw this Wonder Woman was in the present day. So why couldn't they just go with that?
I can see why they did it. It's not just trying to ape Marvel, which DC is definitely doing, but also she's a lot like Captain America. She has her roots in the past.
True.
And in World War II, much more so than other characters at the time. So I'm not opposed to that. I'm more than anything, I'm glad Wonder Woman movie exists and is good.
Yeah.
But there is room for even big blockbusters like this to actually say something, to be to make a statement that is more relevant to the times.
Yeah.
I thought Logan did a pretty good job in that respect, though, just commenting a little bit on society. Anyways, where society's headed. But anyways, what you're gonna say?
Well, but tell me more about that though, because that's interesting. Like what? I have an inkling of your line of thinking, but I want to hear it to see if I'm right.
Well, in Logan, I mean, it wasn't directly a part of the story. The story was obviously about Logan, but the setting that they set it in, they showed the driverless trucks, they showed the giant machines and the GMOs and all that kind of stuff. That was a clear critique of where we are as a society and where we might be headed. And I thought it was done pretty well.
Yeah.
And it did so not as a hammer you over the head with it. It was the setting of where Logan was taking place, and it contributed to the dystopian aspect of it.
Yeah, it was the backdrop really, and I think is where some of the best commentary happens.
Perhaps we need a Wonder Woman in the future.
Yeah. Oh, I would watch that. I would watch that. Yeah. I think
Wonder Woman Beyond.
Wonder Woman in a teenage cyberpunk dystopia.
I'd watch it.
Sounds almost like, what's her name? Ah, crap. Tank Girl.
Yeah,
there was a period in the 40s where the Amazons, they rode kangaroos.
Yes!
I
don't know why.
Idea.
But
because they were excellent horses. Horses don't jump.
If Robin Wright would do it, I would watch it.
There's a lot of weird stuff about Golden Age Wonder Woman that did not make the jump.
Oh,
yeah.
damn. Huh.
I think
jump, kangaroo. Okay,
get out.
Whatever.
I think Wonder Woman is impressive in a lot of ways. Like I think some of the social commentary in there is pretty sharp and pretty direct. But I do agree with you guys. I mean, in all these things we're talking about, there's so much farther to go, and I think the obstacles are so great, in terms of that fear of risk, that fear of engaging directly. But I mean, it happens from time to time, and I hope we've got a lot of exciting filmmakers now. I hope their pens are twitching as we do talk about all this.
Are you listening to us?
No, they're not listening.
They're not listening.
But moving on, one of the I have a trope I want to talk about, and it's one that sort of pains me to bring up because it actually shows up in a lot of movies I like, but I notice the tropes I don't like in the movies I like a lot more because I watch them more, and it's it's something I first noticed in Aronofsky's The Fountain, which I adore. I think it's an incredible movie. J'adore The Fountain. We were doing the French last time with the letter. I guess it's making a comeback. But basically the narrative of The Fountain is it's about a man who's obsessed with something. And he rages over it. He sticks to it. He wants to cure his wife, who has cancer, even though it seems to be impossible. And no matter how many people tell him, it can't be done, he just gets angrier and manlier about it, and won't be deterred until finally at the end he lets go of his obsession and accepts the reality of death. And I actually think The Fountain handled that narrative pretty well and pretty sensitively and pretty thoughtfully. The problem was that narrative kept coming back in movie after movie. The guy who's obsessed with something, but needs to learn to let go, and it became very very therapeutic and kind of new agey. But it pointed towards something that I think is a lot more troubling. It reminded me that Hollywood, has a real problem with how they portray women. The portrayal of women in most mainstream movies is pretty poor. Pretty superficial, pretty poor. Oftentimes, very offensive. But the portrayal of men is better. There's a wider array of
interesting male characters.
But it's still not that good, frankly. Hollywood's... it can do better. Hollywood's, vision of masculinity, I find, is really dispiriting, and which is why I'm discouraged by the persistence of this, obsessive man who needs to let go narrative, because it has become more of a thing of, having, the character look macho and, be, for, an hour or more, I'm gonna do it, goddammit, and just, raging and looking cool.
I say that all the time. I'm gonna do it, goddammit.
But then at the end, it's fine when you do it.
At
the end, they tack on something like, but they repent, they let go, and it's just, really, I think, to make the filmmakers look more sensitive, and it makes me pine for two movies that came out the year I was first really getting into seeing movies in the theater. It was 2004. I was in 7th grade, and Spider-Man 2, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, and Napoleon Dynamite came out that year, and Spider-Man 2 was a great portrayal about of a man who is strong, who is obsessive, but has arguably kind of a softer, more feminine side, a gentler side, and kind of offered a pretty full portrayal of those two things. And then with Napoleon Dynamite, it took a guy who's just weird. But it didn't make fun of him. It didn't, just have us laughing at the moon boots and the sweatpants. It showed him as a sensitive guy who makes mistakes. Who cares about people. He has his obsessions too, but it's not really. He needs to let go. It's more, his obsessions are. It's not one thing. It's a strange catalog of things that makes him human. He likes to draw ligers. He really likes to dance, apparently. He has a sigh, which I guess he wants to be Electra or something.
He builds a cake for a girl that he likes.
Yes, or Pedro. Pedro did that.
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Not to interrupt you, but
no, I'm pretty much done.
I'm curious. Who would you say is perhaps the ultimate figure in literature that kind of points to this obsessiveness and why it continues to be written into characters today?
Oh wow, that's such a great question. Yeah.
Speaking of obsession, isn't that Moby Dick?
Moby Dick is a great example. Odysseus popped into my head.
I was going to say Sherlock Holmes.
Sure. Sherlock Holmes.
Or at least Modern Patience. I should say, very much Sherlock, the TV series on BBC, which is like, he's obsessive and there's some toxicity in that, but he's learning to be better. but we're not going to be as critical on him as we should because Stephen Moffat isn't that clever.
Of course.
To pay homage to your original example of the fountain, I would say Dr. Frankenstein.
Sure. Yes. Yeah.
I love that we all come up with different examples.
Yes.
Well, the fact that we all come up with different examples, I think points to this is something ingrained not just in movies but in storytelling as a whole. And it's not that it can't be done well, because it can. Because I think Blade Runner did it pretty well. I think Inception did it exceptionally well. I think it's just that any kind of storyteller, they're limiting themselves if that's their idea of what masculinity is.
Oh, I see.
It seems like it has to be how much you actually criticize this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like we were talking earlier about like the stupid smart people. Why don't they just do the thing? The movie that popped into my head was The World's End, because they explain why they're not going to just leave the town. They explain why they're making stupid decisions, because they are like 6 pints in by this point.
Everyone's a little drunk.
But then, again, with Obsession, we've got that in our main character who just wants to recapture like the greatest moment of his life, and you realize like he's wearing rose-tinted glasses. His nostalgia was pretty terrible for everyone else, and he's just. Everything he's doing is just motivated by selfishness, and his own iniquities. So that time it works.
And I see in a way that character is sort of an antidote to some of the stuff we're talking about, because it's his obsession isn't about making him look cool. He's scary and depressed and pathetic. In a way that we can connect with him.
In a way that's funny until it's not.
Yeah. I mean,
oh, sorry. I guess this trope works, and we keep seeing it repeat itself, is because maybe it's inherently interesting to a lot of people. I mean, it probably goes back to the timelessness of this idea of the fallacy of obsessiveness. Going back to the story of Icarus, to the Judaism, the story of the golem, this kind of things, and it just goes down into history, with Dr. Frankenstein, et cetera, into the present day, and we'll probably continue to see it. But I think I think you were hinting at this, how I would ask that it just not be overdone with Hollywood films, and that they take the time to actually write quality characters in this regard.
Yeah.
Instead of cheapening it,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a great way of putting it. Yeah.
I think another reason that it's not fading very fast is that toxic masculinity really is, I don't want to say new concept. I mean, it's been battled for years, but I think it's one of this. I feel like this is.
We have a name for it.
We have a name for it now, and we're having conversations, and I think it's hard to make a movie that battles toxic masculinity when it doesn't have a name. And generally, when it does come into a play, it's always like a sensitive character who ends up rising to be the hero, and I feel like it generally falls on younger characters. It's like it's always that character. Their dad's like, "Why don't you play football?" And he's like, "I want to draw." Turns out drawing is what's going to save the world.
So your weirdness has a value commodity to us, and therefore you're accepted.
There you go. And so I think that's part of the problem. So maybe the reason is, we have these macho male characters that have been ingrained for so long, is we're just now finally like, all right, maybe this is a problem. So maybe we'll figure out a way to deal with it. I don't know what the solution is. Write my own TV show. Got it.
I'm in.
Yes.
I got nothing. I think you guys summed it up. And I think it's hard to make a movie in a way that criticizes anything almost, unless you're making a documentary, because with storytelling, it's all generally packaged as entertainment. Even the most horrific tale, like something like The Hurt Locker, is still it may not be a popcorn movie, but you can still buy popcorn when you watch it.
Yes.
So,
I get hungry when I'm nervous.
But let's move on.
I think we covered that topic real well.
I think we did. Yes.
That was definitely us. We were definitely high-fiving.
This is T.H.O. Movie Reviews, and you've been listening to our podcast about the worst tropes in modern movies. If you like this podcast, please look on our YouTube channel, and you will find the second installment of our discussion. Don't forget to like this podcast and click thumbs up, and please like us on Facebook and check out all the great content and reviews we have at thomoviereviews.wordpress.com. Once again, I'm your host, Bennett Campbell Ferguson, and from all of us here at T.H.O. Movie Reviews, happy movie watching.